Zap up in this thing.
All right, so I want to ask you real quick. This is breaking news for most people right now, Bruce. Governor Brian Kemp has just essentially, I'm going to read it verbatim. Brian Kemp.
Oh, shoot. All right.
Hi, Zap.
What's Zap doing?
I'm not sure. But Governor Brian Kemp has essentially said, starting on this Friday, April 24th, some non-official businesses such as barbershops, beauty salons, massage parlors, restaurants are now all available again to start taking in clients, provided they take their best guesses at social distancing. And I'm trying to find the exact statement right now, but I'm reading the paraphrasing of it. His quote was, and I quote, "I don't give a damn about politics right now," which is a very political statement in itself. And I just want to get your thoughts as to how we got here so fast and what that could mean for Metro Atlanta.
Let's start all the way back to the beginning about how the United States government has failed in protecting people altogether when it comes to coronavirus, not novel coronavirus. We have a president who said that this was a hoax, who said that they had this under control, who said there's really nobody who's going to die. And now we're looking at tens of thousands of people who have already passed away, and possibly there's going to be more. It has really affected, I had very little trust in the government in the first place. I have a lot of trust in the people who try to serve the government and why they're doing that. I'm the son of a retired Army colonel, and there's a lot of good people who do good things. It's just the people who are in charge that get elected who may not have your best interests at heart altogether, who may be looking at more dollars than common sense to actually do something. So I'm not sure that this is the best move for Governor Kemp to make at this time, especially, and this is where it gets a little bit more radical, when the numbers were coming out that more Black people were dying at a disproportionate rate. Everybody was like, oh, okay, it's cool. It's time to open up. And it goes along with, again, a decades of failure of the United States government providing health care to its citizens, and has mostly affected Black and brown people, like everything else has, like our talk about marijuana, like our talk about income disparities, food deserts. This is just another way. And the reason, I'm not going to say the full reason why, but one of the factors into that is because Black people do not vote at the rates that they should, to hold their elected officials accountable, to make sure that they're taking care of their communities.
All right. And so now I got to ask you then in particular with regards to both this coronavirus. It's a lot of people are kind of confused. And so what you've been doing on the legal side is like, how did we even get here on the first place where Brian Kemp had as much power as he did? Because people don't necessarily know how much power he has currently, but it's at a level that's never happened in the state's history before.
Exactly. So Brian Kemp, and this is where elections matter, because you had Stacey Abrams versus Brian Kemp in the 2018 election. And with that, the state of Georgia decided to go with Brian Kemp to be their leader in whatever form or fashion was going to happen for the next 4 years. So within that 4 years, something unprecedented happened where we had a global pandemic, unlike anything that we've seen for over 100 years. And at the helm was Governor Brian Kemp. Has Brian Kemp done what he could to stop this? I'll let history judge him rather than me. But the state legislature gave him unprecedented powers. The governor can already call a state of emergency, but you can only get so many funds and do so many things. The state legislature had passed 4 pieces of legislation of giving the governor unprecedented amount of powers during a public health emergency, where due process clauses were ambiguous and vague. So if you were arrested and under a quarantine order, you may not get the due process that you would really deserve. And why? Because we've never been in this state before. So the amount of power that the governor has right now is, like you were saying before, unprecedented. Has he been using it in a way that has benefited the state of Georgia? I'll let everybody else decide on that. I'll tell you one thing though, I'm considered medically fragile, as what he says, because I have asthma. So it's a respiratory disease, and this is a respiratory virus. If you think I'm going outside at this moment in time without a vaccine, without a cure, without anything that says that they can further treat this thing medically possible, I'm just going to stay back for a little bit and see how this works out. So I would love to get a haircut, but I'm going to have to lay off of that for a little bit. And I'm going to be just fine. I'll be
Okay.
just fine.
And so I want to ask you right on top of that is that because Brian Kemp has so much untapped power, can you let people know what actually has the ability to do right now? Because I don't think people are really aware of that.
So the state of Georgia has given Brian Kemp $100 million to address the coronavirus outbreak in its public health emergency. He has the power to oversee or overstep any other local jurisdiction at this time. So, like what was happening in certain counties and certain cities, each mayor would make their own coronavirus quarantine or shelter in place order. Brian Kemp came down and said, I don't care what y'all have, this is what we're going to do. And he had a statewide order that affected everyone. So anything that was on the city of Atlanta beforehand is now null and void, and everybody was under the executive order of the governor. That continues to this day, and his shelter in place order is still going on for a while. The question is, when May 13th, they may have a review of his powers that are going in. But really, it's the state legislature that has to decide on how long his powers are going to be in effect.
Okay.
And the state legislature is not scheduled to go back in until whispers are about June. Because remember, they convened early in March due to coronavirus. And now they were supposed to come back in April to review what the governor has done. It was considered a dangerous situation to bring everyone back in because a lot of your state reps and state senators do have or have been diagnosed with coronavirus. So they said May, and now it's possibly looking like June.
Okay. And so now what I want to ask you, because maybe you can help correct me, did we get, for the entire session, was the session finished or did the session just pause because of coronavirus?
The session is in suspension. So,
okay. So what does that mean?
So that basically means that they are still in the, I forgot what year session it is, but the second year of a bicameral session. So that still means, and this is why it's important, while you're in session, you are required to report to the legislature. Otherwise, they can actually have you escorted by police to report to the legislature. The other important part goes with the June 9th election. So what's happening right now is state legislators cannot raise money for their primary, which happens on June 9th. Typically, legislature gets out around mid-March or early April, and then they can fundraise some more until the last push in May. While you're in session, the state law is very clear, and there's an ethics opinion about it now. You cannot loan yourself money, and you cannot raise money. So which means that this really benefits your challenger, who can get more money and get their word out to challenge the incumbents who are under Georgia law about not being able to raise funds.
Okay, so what about the case of Vernon Jones, who recently just said he's a Democrat in our home county, DeKalb County, in your district, or your former district where you grew up at, who said he's now going to be backing Donald Trump. Do you think that that was more or less to get the word out for himself to get in donations since he couldn't raise funds, or what was that about?
Well, that's a very interesting scenario right there. We had Vernon Jones, who was the former CEO of DeKalb County, also a U.S. Senate candidate, and he's ran for several different other things as well. It matters on who you ask down at the legislature. A lot of people did not think that Vernon Jones was a true Democrat, whatever that means within itself. So are people really surprised that he did this? I'm not. I'm not really surprised. The question is, what is he going to get out of this the most? And the real question is, and this is what I have to have, Vernon Jones' constituents, do they know that he endorsed Donald Trump in this upcoming election? Because if they do not agree with him, which typically DeKalb is the bluest county of all counties in the state of Georgia, and you have a Democrat who says they agree with a Republican on this type of situation, I'm not a fan of party politics, but I am a fan of letting people know who they voted for. And if they need to vote this person out, then so be it. They just need to know that.
Okay. And so now this is a question I got to ask you then. Let's say, unfortunately, it seems like because we don't have a vaccine right now and we don't really have a treatment and we don't have enough tests, let's say hypothetically we have another outbreak of the virus in Georgia. What does that mean, like law-wise? Does that mean we just keep saying a suspension, or does it get canceled, or what does that mean?
So the Georgia legislature by constitution says that you're supposed to stay in session for 40 days, 40 legislative days. A legislative day is legal fiction, where it basically means it could be whatever it wants to be. So, we have a normal 24-hour day or regular work day. A legislative day could last 36 hours. It can last 209 hours or whatever. I think we're on legislative day 26 or 27, and it's just been suspended since March 12th. So we're still on legislative day 20 something right now, and it's just continuing on and on. The only thing that the Georgia Constitution says is that the Georgia legislature has to pass a budget. So if they pass a budget, they can just gavel out and say that's it. And that's typically what we think is going to happen on June 9th. The question that you have going directly, that's just all the legal pros behind it of what is your legislature expected to do. What I always advocate for is y'all just pass a budget and go home. Otherwise, you're going to screw up Georgia because you pass a lot of bad laws.
Well, they've already done it already.
Yeah. I just pass a budget, go home, we'll call it a day. Because you're not going to pass anything good, just pass something bad. And this situation that we have right here, the legislature is supposed to be the check on the governor, especially at this time. Given the unprecedented amount of powers that they've given the governor, I seriously doubt at this time, and again, this is it, during a presidential election, that the legislature is going to do anything to wane in those powers, unless Governor Kemp says, hey, I'm done with this. And if you're governor, absolute power corrupts absolutely. So I can't say for sure if Governor Brian Kemp has used his powers in any way that would be a questionable time. The ACLU has been given a long leeway when it comes to this because we know this is a national pandemic crisis and we all need to be focused on making sure that our state's in the best pros. But we are still working to educate the people in the state of Georgia about what powers they have. I'm going to put up a memo about the governor's powers, hopefully by the end of this week, so people can know exactly which powers he has and which ones he doesn't.
Okay. And I'm going to open up for anyone who has a question or comment for Chris Bruce or even myself. Can you guys, if you want to, you can let me know now. Just because I think, Bruce, you have a lot of good information. You know a lot of stuff about just what's going on in the world of politics right now. And the thing that I'm really concerned with right now is that people like yourself who have a lot of good information that's not getting out to the people. What do you want people to know who may not know already, just either about the legislative process in Georgia or what's going on legally right now?
So the biggest thing I can talk about right now is the June 9th election. Absentee ballot applications, we have a completely new system that's going forward. So I need people to know and understand that they should be prepared to vote by mail. Traditionally, the state of Georgia does not vote by mail. I think in 2018, only about 6% of people voted by mail. 7.2% of that were African Americans who voted by mail. And the reason why you had such a little bit higher than the state average is because then the candidate Stacey Abrams really made a push for people to vote by mail. And that's because, a lot of people just couldn't get to mailboxes. And Georgia, believe it or not, has a tradition of voter suppression. So they thought a way to get rid of voter suppression was to vote by mail. Little did we know that was a way that you would do voter suppression even more with exact match policies and several other different things, which made sure that ballots were not counted.
Okay.
So what I want people to realize is that if you received a ballot application, I thought I had one over here, a ballot application request, send it in as soon as possible. People are supposed to get their ballots for the presidential primary and the general primary all at once with this upcoming this week, starting this week and going into it. You still have time to register to vote. If you have not registered to vote, you can go to Georgia Secretary of State's website and fill out that you want to register to vote at this time. And most importantly, again, get to know your elected official or your candidate that's running against your elected official. You need to figure out in yourself, what are you most passionate about? And you need to advocate to them saying, if I'm passionate about this, you need to be passionate about it as well if you're going to get my vote. Go
Okay.
vote on June 9th.
Okay, so one question I know people brought up before coronavirus happened about the effectiveness of our new voting machines. Can you just briefly explain to people what that was about?
Well, I don't even know how much we're actually going to get a chance to practice on voting machines due to coronavirus. So we spent plenty of millions of dollars on these machines. I think what people are mostly concerned about is, are machines hackable? Yes, they are. Okay, I'm going to tell you that up front. Personally, they are hackable, and pretty much any system that you have is hackable. When people say, I want to go to a straight paper ballot where you're just literally using a Scantron like you used to do, that's still hackable. Why? Because you can always erase people's answers, or you can do what people have done in the past too, ballot stuffing, of just filling out other forms of people who did not come in, putting in. It gets to a certain point where you have to have trust in the system. So if you did not like this process where one of the lobbyists for the vendors was also one of the consultants for your governor, or how this was done behind the scenes and a lot of other issues, well, it's probably because you weren't at the table telling your representative or your state senator, no, it shouldn't happen like this, and this is how it should happen. And there are plenty of organizations. You do not have to become a subject matter expert on these type of things to advocate for them. Like Erica was saying, is there a script for marijuana? Yeah, there's several different scripts, but I'll make one for you so you can go ahead and do it. And once you give that to them, typically people are educated enough to advocate for their own purposes as well. So voting machines coming up, I don't think we're going to have enough people at polling precincts to have you at voting machines. So the average age of a poll worker in the state of Georgia is 72. Okay, if you haven't noticed, coronavirus is mostly affecting the elderly. At least they're dying at higher rates than anyone else. So for their public safety, for our public safety, they're probably going to stay home. That's one of the reasons why the May primary was pushed back even further. We need, one, if you ever want to do something, volunteer to be a poll worker. We need a lot younger people at the polls learning this process, because the older poll workers, some of them make mistakes, not because of their age, but a lot of times the education is not there for them to do it. And I'm not talking about their education. I'm talking about mostly the education that comes from their county board of commissioners, county board of elections, or the Secretary of State's office to train poll workers on what is right and what is wrong in the voting process. But I will always say, and I'll leave on this, be skeptical of a state that put in clauses like moral turpitude in their 1877 Constitution to make sure that Black people do not vote. Be skeptical of a government that has put in poll taxes. Be skeptical of a government that has put in grandfather clauses. Be skeptical of any government that has traditionally disenfranchised you.
Okay, I have a question for you. It's one question in particular. It's actually a two-part question. The first part is, in terms of voting, if you don't know, or can you point somebody in the direction of, what are the voting rights for permanent residents of the United States?
For permanent residents?
Yes, a legal permanent resident. These are people who've gotten their documentation. So everyone from like your resident aliens to people who've gotten green cards. Where could they go, or what do you guys offer to kind of give them the information about their rights with regard and their opportunities to vote?
Who do I normally go from that? The Muslim Voter Project, I think, has information about that.
What's that called
And
again?
Asian Americans Advancing Justice. The
Wait.
thing about the ACLU is we do not register people to vote.
Okay.
We encourage them to get out to vote, but we don't encourage people, because typically registering people to vote typically goes along with a party process. So you don't have to do that in the state of Georgia. You don't have to register as a Democrat or Republican, but in all the other states, well, a few other states, you do have to register as a Democrat or Republican, and you're drawing a Democrat or Republican ballot. ACLU is completely nonpartisan, so that's why we kind of stay away from that.
Okay. Can you say those organizations' names again?
I would say Asian Americans Advancing Justice. I think the Muslim Voter Project does as well. Black Voters Matter is a great organization.
Yeah.
We are doing a lawsuit with them against the Secretary of State about prepaid postage, so I will look at them as well. And I can follow up with you about more resources about that.
Okay. I would also like to add the New Georgia Project also has a lot of
Oh yeah,
good
New Georgia
information
Project is
for
at the
everyone.
forefront
So,
of it.
and then the second
Great
half
organization.
yeah, and
Go
then
ahead.
the second half of that question is just where can someone get, I know you guys don't advocate for the second half of the question, where can someone get information about voting rights in general?
You know, voting rights is such an expansive type of situation. If you go to acluga.org, we have a FAQ on voting rights, especially in this upcoming election. There are other organizations like New Georgia Project, Common Cause, the People's Agenda. All voting is local. I mean, I can't. So at 8 o'clock in Midtown, everybody goes out on their balconies and they salute the healthcare workers. So I guess it's 8 o'clock right now because I can hear them.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
no,
I don't take up too much. Or can you say those organizations one more time, though, just so?
Oh, I was gonna say, I believe Common Cause of Georgia, um, the Muslim Voting Project, New Georgia Project, um, All Voting is Local. Look at the ACLU of Georgia. There's so many. The People's Agenda, the Coalition for the People's Agenda. That's their official name, I believe. Forgive me because I can't think of all of them. There's a lot of them though.
Okay, and then also the ACLU on their own website has frequently asked questions, right?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, and thank you once
Thanks,
again,
Professor Herman. I appreciate you putting that in the chat.
Yeah. And so I want to ask you, last thing going out, is there anything you want people to know about ACLU and what's going on right now, what you're doing?
ACLU of Georgia, since I've been there in 2017, we've had a huge focus on typically empowering the disenfranchised. So I have my executive director is the daughter of Ambassador Young, Andrea Young. So it's a pleasure working under someone who has literally seen the civil rights movement in her eyes. And she's given me a lot of leeway of using the resources that happen here in the ACLU and really affecting the people who have been typically disenfranchised. So when the city of Atlanta, when Fulton County was going to shut down polling precincts in Southwest Atlanta, which was going to affect over 8,000 senior citizens, we launched a petition drive to get people out in the community to overturn that decision. Not only that, we lobbied down at the Board of Elections Commission so they would actually overturn their decision, which is what they did, and those people were still able to vote. Why does that matter? And why do I bring that up? During the 2017 mayoral election, it was only decided by a little over 800 votes. And we're talking about those we're talking about 10% of that 8,000, 10%. If those people didn't vote, you may have a new mayor in the city of Atlanta right now. So that's why when people say every vote matters, it really does. And the people who are advocating for all those votes to matter, they're doing a hard job every day of doing it. And they can't do it alone. So I encourage you to join the fight wherever you can. If it's not voting that you're passionate about, we also deal with criminal justice, like we were talking about marijuana. We deal with reproductive rights as well. When that abortion ban was passed, House Bill 481, I was down there lobbying every day with Planned Parenthood and NARAL and several other organizations. And then when it did pass, we had a litigation suit ready to be filed right then and there. Privacy and technology, I believe, is a very important civil right that's being jeopardized at this time. Anytime, I know you've heard the whispers about, and this is something you could probably talk more about, King, Google and Apple getting together as a tracer app for your phones and other things, you should be worried about that. Because if they can trace, they already can trace a huge amount of information already. So for them to come back and say, well, we're going to do it to a bigger level or a bigger effect, you know that your civil rights and civil liberties are at stake. And there's several other things that we focus on, LGBTQ rights, especially within the trans community, especially within the trans community of color, because most of the time, women in the trans community of color or trans women of color are typically do not have a voice at the table. So again, I encourage everybody to go to the ACLU of Georgia's website, where if you care about your civil rights or civil liberties, we've got something for you. And if you need, I can put you to work anywhere possible, especially within the state of Georgia.
Okay. And thank you again, Bruce, and for doing this on a Monday night. Happy 420 to all of you guys who smoke. I'm not a smoker like that at all, actually. But I hope you guys have a really great time. Afterwards, we'll make sure we get some more information on how you guys can advocate for legalizing and decriminalizing marijuana in the state of Georgia. And thank you guys once again for also just like hanging out with us and talking about everything that you would be interested in asking questions about. So let me know if there's somebody else you want me to talk to. You can always hit me up on all social media at I am King Williams, or if you have my number, you can always hit me up on that as well. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in tonight. Thank you guys for tuning in, just learning a lot from Christopher Bruce of the ACLU of Georgia.
Hey, thanks for having this. This is great.
All right.
All right.